to our March webinar for the AGRE Association of Graduate Regulatory Educators. We have two wonderful speakers presenting with us today. And just to introduce you to myself and to AGRE, so my name is Oren Chisholm. I'm the Program Director for the Master of Pharmaceutical and Medical Device Development Program at the University of Sydney in Australia. I'm also on the board of AGRE and the Chair of the Education Committee. AGRE is an association for graduate regulatory educators where we come together and share best practice in graduate regulatory education. And since many of our programs are online, I have asked Negin Mirriahi to join us for this webinar today to discuss best practices in postgraduate online education. And we also have Dr. Barbara Marusiak from Arizona State University joining us as well. So looking forward to the session today. Negin is Associate Professor at the University of South Australia in Australia, and she is a very distinguished researcher and educator. She has a doctorate in higher education, specifically in online education, and many years' experience in both teaching online and researching best practices for online. And she was also the co-developer and deliverer of a wonderful MOOC on learning to teach online, and a more recent one on pivoting to online teaching, research and practitioner perspectives. So very much looking forward to the presentations today, and I'll hand it over to you, Negin, to start. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you. Good afternoon, good evening, everyone. It's my pleasure to join you today. As mentioned in today's relatively brief presentation, I'm going to go over some best practices around online teaching education, particularly for the postgraduate sector, the postgraduate students. I'll be talking about how to build a community of students, and then I'll be talking about some tips around video development, as that might be something that you are doing. We'll talk a little bit about evaluation strategies that you might want to use to evaluate your teaching practice. And then we'll just round off at the end with just some general musings around postgraduate teaching. I've been teaching postgraduate studies since 2014, around then, and particularly in the space of teacher development in particular. So while I'm not particularly teaching in the areas that you're teaching in, my cohort of students have been professionals coming back to do some sort of postgraduate learning. So similar to some respects. And as Oren mentioned, I've done quite a bit of research around online education and education in general. So with that, I wanted to start off with talking about a particular model that I like when talking about designing for learning, which is the community of inquiry model, and it's quite relevant for postgraduate learning in particular. It's really about bringing three presences together to make that educational experience, which is a social presence, cognitive presence, and a teaching presence. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over each of those presences, and then I'm going to provide some examples from a course that I'm currently teaching to show you in practice how I apply these different presences. So the first one is teaching presence, which is really about everything that you do as the teacher. And that's everything from designing the course structure and the curriculum, choosing which activities to use, and choosing and selecting appropriate technology and delivery modes for your students, through to how you personalize the course experience, the learning experience for your students, particularly if it's fully online, where you want to be providing some sort of your own presence in that class. You likely aren't meeting these students in person. You likely don't have those types of conversations in the corridor before class, after class, the way you would if it was a typical on-campus experience. So it's important to be thinking about how you might bring yourself into that setting. So the use of perhaps some introductory videos, regular announcements to help students along. The other aspect of teaching presence is very much being that guide on the side, moderating students, encouraging them to engage with discussions, engage with each other, particularly when trying to get our postgraduate students to be learning the content that you provided for them. And of course, the direct instruction that you provide is teaching presence as well. The assessments that you create, the feedback that you give to your students is all part of that teaching presence that you bring forward into that online learning experience. So I'll show you an example now. So this is a screenshot of one of my courses. We always have a little bit of a video at the top. It's myself and my co-teacher. There's two of us teaching this course. Very briefly describing what the course is about, but most importantly, bringing ourselves, our human selves, into the course as much as possible, particularly that we don't meet our students in person ever. And we want to be able to be providing that sort of presence as we go through the semester with them. So we always have a little bit of that introductory video. And then at the start of each week, I've got weeks in mind, you might have modules or topics. I like to put up a little bit of a table that is the need to know and the need to do. So it's really clear for students what exactly you want them to know that particular week and what they need to do. Our students are professionals, they are busy, they're very dedicated to their work, they're very dedicated to their study, but they want to know what it is exactly that they need to do to progress through that week. So I try to make it really clear. They're reading perhaps a chapter reading, they're reading an article or a blog post I might be sharing with them. I might want them to listen to a podcast, and always a reminder as to when the assessment is due. Every week, my colleague and I will get together on Zoom for about 10-15 minutes, not more than that. And we record a really quick video right at the very start of the week. And that video has two purposes. One is to recap the previous week in terms of what they did, maybe their engagement in a discussion forum or an activity that we want to recap, and then to also forward speak about what the new week is about, reminders about assessments, reminders about that we might be having an online chat later in the week, and what we hope that they would gain from that week. So that this is a typical starting point of each of our weeks to bring our own selves into that course. And this is just an example here around that teaching presence. The readings, I usually provide a short little brief blip about what the reading is, what I want them to think about, links to the readings, maybe a video, and maybe a podcast. So this is just an illustration of all of this that we're putting on the screen is part of that teaching presence. Now, moving forward, this is the social presence bit that I'll talk about now, and that's really about establishing trust with your students, sharing information about yourselves through perhaps some live Zooms that you might have with them, the videos like I mentioned, try to bring in your own personality into the mix. Online learning can get quite formal at times, so it's good to have a little bit of informality where they can get to know you as a person as well as their teacher and their guide. Bringing in that social presence is also about opportunity for the students to build trust within each other, opportunities for them to interact in a bit of a more informal way, like they would if it was in person. They might have a chat with somebody. Trying to provide those kinds of opportunities is much harder in an online setting. So having an icebreaker at the beginning perhaps is one way to help facilitate that. And I'll show some examples here. In the course that I have, we usually have we call it a postcard forum. Our students are from different places around Australia. So we usually ask them, what's your role? What do you hope to learn in the course? And more recently, what's a photo of a place that they might have traveled to? A lot of them haven't been traveling much because of COVID. So it's, an opportunity for them to do a little bit of armchair traveling, see each other's photos of different places, and start a little bit of that casual conversation like they might in class, just to start building a little bit of rapport, and also as the teachers to get to know our students a little bit better. We also have a general course discussion forum, an opportunity, a forum, a sense for students to ask any questions, share anything additional things I might want to share with them that isn't so much part of the curriculum. And then I create a bit of a cafe. I've also seen some people call this a hallway chat sort of thing, an opportunity for students to post those kind of messages that are more informal, like they would be having with each other in the hallway or in a cafe, for example. I've noted that the teachers won't really moderate this. This is mostly for the students to use for their own purpose. But just these little bits of things just to help build a little bit of that social presence. And then the cognitive presence part. This is the actual student inquiry portion, setting up those high expectations for our students, developing those activities that are really relevant and challenging, and as much as possible, relating it to their professions. They are professionals, they're working, they're taking a course because they want to enhance their career. How can you build those activities and those assessments to be applicable, that they can use perhaps right away or in their future career? So creating those opportunities as much as possible to have those types of hands-on activities, probing discussions, like I said, and interview recordings with professionals seems to be a really popular way, particularly for postgrad students, to get a sense of what professionals in the field are doing in the career that they're trying to move into or trying to build. So as much as possible, we try to bring in interview recording. It's kind of like how you might have guest speakers, except professionals tend to be busy, and if you bring them in for a guest talk and not that many students show up into that Zoom session, it doesn't look too good. So instead, we might do a recording with them instead, and that recording you can repurpose over and over again. And now I'll just show you a couple examples of that. So I've got a week here where I've started off with a TED Talk. I try to bring in a range of videos in my course. I try not to reinvent the wheel. There's lots of great stuff on YouTube. If I can find a good video on YouTube, I'd rather use that than use my time to create a video that's probably not even up to scratch compared to what's out there. So a TED Talk video, for example, and then a reading to go along with it that relates directly with it. And then the point I wanted to make here was here we then have an interview video specifically in relation to that topic. So that's building that cognitive presence, starting off with an interesting video, engage and hook the students right away, bring in a bit of readings, bring in an interview video with somebody in the field, and then I'd have an activity. And one of the activities I chose to use was using a tool called Padlet. And it's a great little tool if you are asking students to create any or upload any images in particular. So I can see in this example, students had to do a bit of a data visualization illustration following specific instructions I gave them. And then they put little comments around it. And then I would go in and give them some feedback back to that. So Padlet's a great little tool that very easy to use, particularly if you wanted them to post some images and didn't want to use a typical discussion forum. But it's that gradual building of things in terms of their cognitive presence. And then I'd have an assessment task. I include an assessment video where I go over the rubric, I go over the instructions for students. It's recorded. They can go back and look at it. I've received lots of great feedback around having a good assessment video so that they know exactly what they have to do to succeed in the course. Clear task description. I create templates. Not only are the templates useful for the students, but they're also useful when you're marking, because then everything's really clear exactly where you want it to be, and it makes your marking a lot more efficient as well. And here's just an example where I had getting them to have an assessment where they're bringing their experience from their profession into it, thinking about their own context when they're trying to do their assessments, just makes it more relatable for them. And now I'll just go through a few tips around fostering that community in an online setting. Really being clear about your expectations from students. Where do you want them to communicate? Do you want them to post something on Twitter, on a wiki, on a forum? Do you want them to make 2 posts a week or more? Being really clear about your expectations helps them be able to navigate that and not to guess. And really, they want to know why they're doing it. They're busy, they're time poor. So activities for the sake of activities, they're going to see right through it. So making it really relatable for them as to why you want them to do that particular activity. And you want to be the guide on the side, really. You're steering their conversations when necessary, but you're letting them have those conversations and that debate. And acknowledging students, when I mentioned the intro video of each week and where I might recap what happened the previous week, naming some of the students, John said this, it was really interesting. Great to see so much conversation between Mary and Sue. You can, naming them just brings a little bit of that personalization. And then checking the learning analytics to see if students are engaging or not. And I'll talk, in the next few slides about learning analytics. But essentially, with a postgrad class, my classes aren't terribly large, but it's useful to know which students are engaging and when they're not. So I can send that little email and say, did you know the course has started? Or did you know you got an assessment coming up? You haven't really been in the course much. Is everything going all right? And often I would get a message going, oh, thanks for checking in. My partner's had COVID and I've been really busy, or my kids are sick and I've had to do X, Y, and Z, but I'll get back into the course, or I'm really feeling disengaged and unmotivated to complete the course, but thanks for reaching out. I think I'll be able to continue with it. I'll book in a time to talk to you, etc. So really important to do those little bits of just little check-ins with our students. And in a way, they're our students, but they're also our colleagues. Videos is a popular topic. Given these days, a lot of us are creating videos. And so it's really important to think about what type of video you want to put. Is it an interview with someone? Is it a case study where they might be talking about what they do in their field? Or is it an actual declarative knowledge sort of video where you just want them to learn a particular concept or particular procedure? So really thinking through what the purpose of that video is. And like I said, don't reinvent the wheel. Check to see if there's a video that's out there that suits what you need. If not, then you can create your own. And consider the use of images and words. So really important that you're not adding extra irrelevant decorative images. It just increases students' cognitive load. We sometimes think adding a bit of imagery on our course websites or our PowerPoint slides might make it more engaging. In actual fact, it just adds on the extra that students have to look at. So instead of paying attention to what you're saying in the video or the text on the screen, they're busy looking at the decorative images. Of course, useful, important images, by all means, put them in, but just being conscious that you're not putting extra irrelevant things on there. Be kind to yourself when you're creating videos. It takes practice. Writing a script can help, or at least some talking points. It's very easy when we're recording videos to want to get it perfect. You don't have to get it absolutely perfect. You're human. Students know that. It's okay to not get that perfect video. Otherwise, you're spending hours and hours getting that to perfection, going back and doing it again. And by the time it's that 10th or 15th time that you're trying to do that recording, you're not being very natural in it, and they can see through that. So just be kind to yourself and don't worry so much about it being absolutely perfect. If you were in the classroom, you wouldn't be doing it over and over again. It wouldn't be perfect either. You could consider adding some in-video quiz questions if you wanted to, if it was relevant for your course. Giving some feedback to your students, especially if it's a declarative type of video, has shown to be quite useful and engaging for students as well. And keep them short, less than 10 minutes, to the point. You can have more than one, you can have as many as you need to, but the research has been showing that the shorter the video, the more likely students are going to watch it from beginning to end. And add captions or a transcript for a lot of students. I use something called otter.ai, which it runs through my video and creates the transcript itself for me. It's not 100%, it's about 90. I indicate that it's about 90. There might be a few typos in there, but it's useful for the students who just want to do a quick skim through later instead of watching the entire video. Now, I'll really quickly go over some evaluation strategies. The image you're seeing now is a reflective cycle. So a reflective cycle for the teacher. So these are teacher evaluation strategies about how you might want to evaluate your teaching practice. Starting off around collecting some data about what happened, in your course. What is it that, how did you feel about it? Did it go well? Thinking then through about, okay, so, this is how my course went. I had this Padlet activity. Some students liked it, some students didn't. Well, what can I think about doing that better next time? What's the change I might do? How might I refine that activity? Maybe my instructions weren't clear. Maybe I didn't relate it to the assessment task very clearly, whatever it might be. So that's a bit of a reflective cycle. This is another approach to evaluation, which I like quite a bit. It's off of Stephen Brookfield's 4 lenses, which essentially is saying that you put your t-shirt on as if you're the self. So you're going to do a self-reflection of how your teaching went in your semester. You can put on a peer's t-shirt on. So now from the view of your peer, if a peer was to look at your course or sit in on a class, what would they think of it? You put on your student reflection part instead of, okay, if I'm the student, how did I experience that? And then you can also put a theory lens on. What does the theory say, or the research say, or the blogs that I've read about says? And then there's a fifth one, which is that learning analytics data, which can be really useful alongside these 4 other lenses. And the learning analytics data essentially is, you've got an online class, there's tons of logs of student data of what's happening. You may have access to a dashboard through your learning management system. It might be a useful dashboard, it might not. But there's lots of data about whether students are accessing the videos that you created or put in your course, or whether they've even accessed the course itself. You want to think about what you want to actually evaluate when it comes to evaluation. Do you want to know, did your students watch your videos? Do you want to know if they posted in the forum or completed the activities? So rather than just jumping in and looking at all of the logs of data, it's first taking that step back to say, well, what is it that I actually want to know? And is there some of that data that could help inform me about what's happening, particularly when it's online? We don't really know, it's different from in the classroom where you can look at your students and get a gauge of who's engaging and who's not. When it's online, a lot of that is unknown. So that's when the data could be helpful. And as I said, I use the data really just to nudge my students, contact them. If somebody doesn't submit, I might want to reach out and say, look, you haven't submitted. Is everything all right? You still planning to submit your assessment, or what's going on? And just some really final musings from my experience with postgraduate education. Like I said, students are professionals. They're super busy. Being kind, being flexible, where possible, obviously. We are teaching formal courses, and so there are requirements around that. But where possible, just flexibility around those assessment instruction extensions if they need it, booking time for consultations. What we do in our class is we set some times, like say Monday afternoon or Wednesday evening, but I let them know if none of those times work, just reach out. We can try to do a 10-minute Zoom whenever is good for them. And I try to have a weekly drop-in Zoom. It's drop-in because our courses are asynchronous. I can't find a time where everyone will be able to make it. So I do a drop-in Zoom or a drop-in team session. I record it. So I usually get, maybe half dozen people there, sometimes a dozen if I'm lucky. But many of them are watching that on their own time afterwards, because getting a perfect time for everybody is really challenging. I try to do it on the evening, so it's after work for people, but for some people it won't work. And as I said, trying to be really authentic with your assessment so students know that it's something they can actually use in their professional context. And marking guides, rubrics, templates, anything to make it easier for students to understand what it is that they need to do to be successful in your course. And that pretty much wraps it up. I've got a final slide of resources and references. I will share these with Oren, who can share these with you if you did want to go back and look at them. Some of these are blog posts, some of these are articles and websites of various nature. But I will stop there and take any questions if anyone has any. I know it went through a lot very quickly.
Thank you very much, Negin, and that was a wonderful summary and something for all of us to think about in putting our courses together and designing courses. And I'm just in the midst of trying to design some new courses, so it's really helpful. Thank you. I guess the biggest issue I have is trying to get those fully online students to engage, especially if, so I've come into a new program recently and they were used to not really engaging that much. So how can I stimulate them to engage a lot more in the even just the hallway chat type sessions? Any extra tips there?
I think it's being as relevant as you can be with what you want them to do, and being really mindful that they are busy. And I think previously I used to get quite hung up on they're not engaging in my activity or my forum that I've created. And I've learned to just let it go in a sense. If I let the assessment drive their learning as much as possible, if they're engaging in the assessment, if they are doing fairly well in the assessment, then that's all fine. I've also realized that students like to engage in different ways. So while some would like that asynchronous discussion activity. Others would rather come to that synchronous Zoom session and chat with you then, get their answers then, or have a talk about the concepts or what's bothering them or whatever at that time. Others like the one-on-one, having even just a 10-minute conversation with you about their assessment or what's concerning them in a one-on-one private setting. So I think it's just being flexible to the different needs of students, at the same time making it not completely challenging for yourself either. And so it's just hitting that kind of happy point. But yeah, no, they're not going to engage if they're busy and if they don't see a reason for it, to be honest. And so then it's thinking through, well, what's a different activity that I could do? I don't have a...
If those went on the market, it would be going for at least $550.
Oh, who's that?
Slide there. No, what I was saying is they'll see through it if they don't see the point of it in terms of the discussion forums. I only have about 2 or 3 discussion forums in my 12-week course anyway, so I pick them specifically for certain weeks. I try to make it sound like, if you engage in this one, you're going to talk about things that are relevant to your assessments, a good opportunity to get feedback from your teachers, from your fellow students. Not all of them will engage, but others will come into the Zoom drop-ins. Some of them will watch the Zoom drop-ins, and some of them will do the booking ins for consultation sort of things.
Thank you.
So this is Joanne. Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Negin, I'm actually the director of the program at ASU as well as a professor. So we spend a lot of times, hi Jerry, talking about how busy our students are, and they're all professionals and working. Well, most of my staff are working full-time too, most of my faculty, and they're very busy. So all these things are absolutely wonderful, but very time-consuming. If you could put one thing to keep, what would be your number one thing to keep students engaged? If you could only had time to do one thing, what would be your top recommendation?
I would say those weekly intro videos would be what I would do. It takes about 10 or 15 minutes a week. It's not a long time. I don't practice them. It's not a perfect video. It's hi, welcome to week 4. We're talking about X and Y. Last week you did X, Y, and blah. This week we're going to focus on this. Just a reminder, your assignment's due next week or in a couple weeks, or if you haven't started assignment 2, you probably should get on it now. Lots of casualness in that video. The first time you do it, you might do it a couple of times. You might have some slow starts. By the time you've done it a few times, it's just a quick and go. And it's about 10, 15 minutes. If time to really look at, well, what week is it? What are they going to do this week? I've forgotten. Let me remind myself. What did they do last week? Quick look at the forum or quick look at the activity, and then just kind of do a 5 minutes top kind of spiel for the students. If I had one more thing that I would do though, Joanne, is the Zoom drop-ins. And I didn't used to do these, and since COVID, Zoom's become this thing, and so we gave it a try, and I actually enjoy them because it's the opportunity that I can actually engage with my students. So the students that rock up, they're the ones who are engaged, and you have some really good chats, and you leave it actually being energized as a teacher. Like, we come into this profession being a teacher, and then when it's online, it can be so disconnected from your students that you start to even second guess yourself at times, going, why am I doing this? I signed up to teach in the classroom, not to teach online where I don't even see my students. I don't even know if they're engaging in what I've created. But those Zoom synchronous sessions actually make it really worthwhile, even if it's not all the students, and you just kind of let that go. And you just go, look, they're busy. They're not going to make it to my 8 o'clock Zoom or whatever. They're going to look at the recordings, and they come back to you and they say, look, I really enjoy those. Sorry I couldn't attend any, but I watched them, and it's great to see that conversation happening with others. So that's what I would do. I do mine for an hour. It's an hour a week. It's basically like running a class. And I don't lecture in that. I just do it. It's a drop-in. What do you want to talk about this week? Let's talk.
Very good. And the one thing I liked that you mentioned when you were doing your presentation on your weekly, overview or whatever that you do is you talk about the reading and what they should read. And I think that's something we give our students books, we tell them chapters, but we don't tell them what is important. So I think that's important. Thank you very much. And I see Jerry nodding his head. He was one of our students, so thank you.
Yes, yes, yes. I got to agree, Dr. Pfeiffer. I really enjoyed your class, the several that I've taken with you, and I thought that was probably one of the better things about your classes is you take the time to do those meetings, and you know, like she said, I wasn't able to attend all of them, but it was helpful to get that feedback and to have that recording. I think it's very helpful, and I very much enjoyed your class. And as you said, it's one of the harder classes. I enjoyed it. It's been one of my favorites so far.
Thank you. Any other questions, or we'll move on to Barbara's presentation? Now let me just find your slides, Barbara, and upload them for you.
Thank you.
So is that coming up on the screen okay?
I think it looks perfect.
Excellent, thank you. So Barbara Marusiak is our second speaker. I guess Barbara doesn't need much introduction to most of you, but she's a registered nurse by background and very experienced in clinical research, and has held a number of positions in clinical research over her career. And Barbara teaches into the program at Arizona State University, and she's going to be presenting to us today on forging collaborations between academic and industry partnerships, which is something all of our universities, I'm sure, are really trying to push. I know my current university is very much looking at how to forge better relationships and partnerships with industry. So looking forward to your presentation, Barbara.
All right, thank you so much. Well, thank you everybody for, can you hear me okay? Yeah?
Yes, yes.
Okay, perfect. For having me here this afternoon. I do want to spend a few minutes sharing our latest offering that we are giving to the students at the ASU's Master of Clinical Research Management and Regulatory Science programs, and that we're expanding our capstone program, the course, to actually include experiential learning. That meaning that capstones can be done at the industry partners and or become an internship. And that this all became from an unsolicited request for help from industry not too long ago. Next slide, please. My computer hates Teams for some reason. So thank you, Lauren. So as you follow the timeline of an investigational product from concept to commercialization, you're going to find that academia can't do it alone in providing education, skill set training, and real-life experiences. Industry partners have unmet needs that need to be investigated and solved. They can come to the table and provide real-time mentorship that extends beyond academia. They can be a source of funding for program support, scholarship, and potential future jobs. So now's the time to bridge the gap. Next slide. Before the onset of COVID, many organizations in clinical research had continued their day-to-day operations just as usual. COVID hit. The pandemic actually catapulted them into long-range plans of transformation now and moving faster. This acceleration challenged the industry by shortening lengthy vendor evaluation processes, uprooting existing cross-departmental workflows, and requiring swift and meticulous compliance and regulatory work. All the measures that help reduce the spread of COVID, they required sites, sponsors, and CROs to reimagine how to safely conduct clinical trials in remote technology-based environments. This definitely was no small task, as adopting new technology at any research organization requires administrative, regulatory, and process changes. This opened up opportunities to bring in students from programs such as ours to help complement existing staff and bring in fresh, new perspectives. Next slide, please. So this last January, just a couple months ago, we formally launched the Clinical Research Management and Regulatory Science Industry Alliance with the acronym of CREA. This provides an opportunity for our students to experience clinical trial development, implementation, management, and regulatory development in the clinical research industry, not just in Arizona, but worldwide. Our proposed alliance is going to help enable research collaboration and innovation partnerships between ASU, students and faculty, researchers in industry, other colleges and university who want to play with us, government and nonprofit organizations. And our goal is to provide an extraordinary value. Next slide, please. How often does faculty hear from students? How can I get the job if no one gives me the chance to get the experience? I kind of remember early in my career, I was going for a CRA position, and I remember reading it said requires 5 years experience. So who was going to take a chance on me as a site coordinator with no real sponsor monitoring experience? And how was I going to get that? So through our capstone program, we are finding that it's helpful to help seek out these opportunities for our students to kind of help them prepare for future careers in the research industry or just be more comfortable in the one that they're in. Our students internalize all aspects of clinical research processes from ideation to evaluation while working towards solutions that address those unmet clinical needs. This requires a substantial student participation and a very effective faculty advising. Our students and faculty are empowered to work in an interdisciplinary environment in which students, clinicians, engineers, research, med tech consultants, entrepreneurs, everyone, we come together to create solutions that influence patient care by building a world with more birthdays. Next slide. So it has been suggested that collaboration is when individuals come together in pursuit of a shared goal. Our alliance looks to position itself to meet the challenges of collaborating with industry, seeking sponsored senior capstone projects, and developing long-term partnership with lasting impact. Science is meant to be shared, and ideas are supposed to be discussed to gain different perspectives and input. These visionary partnerships will allow our capstone students to engage in real problems and working on real solutions. Next slide, please. Developing breakthrough technologies is hard work. So inventors, scientists, entrepreneurs, they rely on science as a map to guide them through the development process. Collaborations thrive under these specific circumstances. So when research has both scientific and commercial potential, a collaboration such as CREA can help enable specialization and a better allocation of tasks and responsibilities. Academics can give their scientific output a boost by gaining access to industry skills, know-how, and equipment, while leaving the commercial work to their industry partner. Academia and industry advance together, but their relationship is a complicated one. Side by side, they can complement each other. Academia brings in new knowledge, industry finds ways to commercialize it. The fact that two institutional environments differ can complicate a collaboration journey. Yet if you look at the value to industry, value to academia, the exact same differences also create opportunities for specialization and increased performance for both sides. This is definitely a voyage worth taking. Next slide, please. CREA, the right fit. Many people still feel that academics have little to no contact with industry and kind of remains a bit suspicious about what industry's motives and behaviors are. So we position CREA to bridge that gap through transaction, collaboration, and alliance. Academia and industry share a symbiotic relationship. There are many advantages for collaboration for both industry and academia. For academics, these include career opportunities, research funding, awareness of industry trends, inspiration by application derived from discussions. For industry, these involve access to extended networks, thinking outside the box, training, ability to find new talent to hire, and access to specialized world-leading resources. Of course, making contacts and exchanging knowledge are another advantage for both partners. Next slide, please. Experiential learning. It's learning by doing. Next slide. Okay. The old adage states, tell me and I forget, show me and I remember, involve me and I understand. This last part of the statement is the essence of inquiry-based learning. Inquiry implies involvement that leads to understanding. Furthermore, involvement in learning implies possessing skills and attitudes that permit you to seek solutions to questions and issues while you construct new knowledge. Educators understand that schools need to go beyond data and information and move towards the generation of useful and applicable knowledge, a process supported by inquiry learning. In the past, our country's success depended on our supply of natural resources. Now it depends on a workforce that works smarter. Okay, next slide, please. Inquiry is what researchers and scientists do. Science is, by nature, inquiry-based. So experiencing inquiries, students learn how to be those researchers. They learn more than just concepts and facts. They learn the processes of discovering and establishing concepts. One important outcome of inquiry should be useful knowledge about the natural world and our human-designed worlds. How are these worlds organized? How do they change? How do they interrelate? How do we even communicate about, within, and across these worlds? These broad concepts contain important issues and questions that our students will face through their lives, whether they're in school or going out into their careers. Next slide, please. Inquiries is a method that uses the rational powers and scientific thinking processes to explore and learn about some aspect of the real world. In order to achieve this, facilitators must create a learning environment steeped in experiences that allow students to use their rational powers in a coordinated way. Such experiences will consequently help develop their logical thinking abilities. And the one thing I've always learned, back on the slide, was that learning to learn really just kept me going to wanting to learn more. Okay, next slide, thank you. According to American Cavallo, back in 1997, they came up with the learning cycle, and it's more than just a classroom strategy. It's a philosophy of education, a model of instruction that promotes critical thinking and meaningful learning. It places students at the center of their learning experiences, encouraging them to engage in explorations, form new understandings, and then relate those understandings to other concepts and generalizations. Experiential learning is a process through which students develop knowledge, abilities, and values from applied learning outside the traditional academic setting. These experiences stimulate academic inquiry by promoting interdisciplinary learning, civic engagement, cultural competency, leadership, and other valuable skills. Learning is an engaged learning process whereby students learn by doing and then they reflect on that experience. These learning activities can include, but are not limited to, the hands-on projects, internships, practicums, or field experiences. Next slide. Experiential learning is a form of learning that allows students to connect with material on a personal level and experience it for themselves. So benefits to students in our experiential learning process is going to allow them to, one, explore different career paths. This gives them the opportunity to try out different activities in their field of study and maybe decide better on what their post-graduation career path is. I know several students that I have spoken with, some of them are coming from a clinical research assistant position, and they're looking to see, can I explore, what is data management more like? Maybe that's something, because I do monitoring and I'm looking at data, but maybe there's something more to that that I'm more interested in. So giving them those opportunities, which leads to the second benefit, they got to learn in a safe place. While students take part in classroom scenarios that usually pertain to workplace challenges that they're going to face, there's no substitute for the experience in the real world. Our third benefit is boosting engagement, ownership, and accountability. By gaining hands-on experience in the real world, students can better engage with the concepts or materials that they see in front of them. Next slide, please. The time frame of our capstone courses actually coincide with the ASU academic schedule. Each of our capstones is approximately 16 weeks long. We have a fall session, spring session, summer session. And they We go through each capstone, irregardless of holidays. The students are very dedicated to their course there. Next slide, please. So keeping that time frame in mind, when we talk with our industry partners that have approached us or the ones that we are approaching, we want to make sure that they understand the time frame of this capstone, that there is 16 weeks. Now, that being said, we can also, if there is a capstone or an unmet industry need that extends beyond the 16 weeks, maybe there is a clinical trial that's going to be worked on, and the industry partner is looking at 3 to 5 years for this. That helps us plan when we can have students available for them. Maybe first one starts in spring, then we kind of just go all the way through until the industry partner says that that project is done. So we also talk with our industry partners to provide a work environment that allows for substantial new learning and professional growth. We want to make sure that when they go there, they're not doing repetitive tasks like stuffing envelopes or something very not menial to their position at this point, but one that requires independent thinking and learning some new skills. When we work with the partners, we help identify the type of student they need. Are they looking for a regulatory student? Are they looking for an operational type of clinical research student? Or is it more management? Or is it database? What are they looking for? Are there student qualifications that they are requiring? Are there certain skills sets that they need to come in? Do they need to be proficient in Excel or a database management? We also discuss the available projects and what the duties are, and that's so that everyone is comfortable. The faculty is comfortable, the student is comfortable, and the industry partner is comfortable with what's going to be done. As I mentioned, we can have legacy projects that could span for several sessions. And the other area that we do speak with is agreements. ASU has a student placement agreement that industry partners need to sign, and it spells out pretty much what the industry is responsible for and what ASU is responsible for. We do also have at times a non-disclosure agreement, and there may be a master service agreement. We may have a partner that wants to have several students in a variety of forms and fashion to be in there. So having work orders under a master service agreement for the students would be appropriate. We also establish with our industry partners who does the supervising and mentoring of the students, who will be working on their evaluations and helping them with their performance and their learning. Next slide, please. So how do we go about building this industry alliance and partnerships? We meet our potential partners through conferences, meetings. Maybe it's introduction by known contacts. Maybe it's just a random query that happens, which happened to start with ours. It could be outreach efforts. Maybe we find that we have expertise in certain areas and look for specific industry partners that we can place students in. It could be networking opportunities. It may be social or professional gatherings in which all of a sudden the talk of capstones and internship comes up, and wouldn't you know, they're looking for somebody that they need. So I'd like to, over the next few slides, kind of share with you some of our current partners and show you an example of a current capstone and an internship that we have going on. And we just started in January. Next slide. So at ASU, we have already started collaborating with the College of Health Solutions. It's primarily with their clinical and community translation science. They have several studies going out there in the community, but they're missing the whole portion of what clinical research really is. And so they're looking at us to help them, to guide them and teach them a little bit about, and also have students provide a service. We're also working with the College of Health Innovations, and that is primarily with the ASU Mayo MedTech Accelerator. Next slide, please. So I just mentioned the MedTech Accelerator. This is a very unique opportunity. Mayo and ASU bring in 8 bio entrepreneurs, very young startup companies, in once a year, and they actually are presenting next week, the next cohort. in which they are going to be working with Mayo. They have about a 2-month onboarding process in which they go through basic business startup opportunities and processes there. And then they are assigned to a PI at Mayo to help them work with a trial if they want, or whatever their project is. This year, there are going to be 7 companies. 3 of them are international companies, which gives our students a great opportunity to work on international projects. We also have been starting to work with several of the hospital organizations, Honor Health, Banner Health, Phoenix Children's Hospital, on capstones and internships. We've had requests for students for budgeting and contracting. Can they come and help us? We have trials that we're looking at, and we need some help in that area. LabCorp Covents approached us on not only having graduate students, but undergraduates. They have some opportunities in their universal internship program there, and want to make sure that we're aware of it, especially for students who want to expand into the CRA monitoring type of realm. Becton Dixon, a very large global medical device company headquartered here in Phoenix, is looking to partner with us, and we just finished signing the student placement agreement. I used to work there, well, before they acquired Bard, and there are so many opportunities in the medical device realm, not only for clinical research, but for compliance, for the regulatory side. They are global, and so again, we're going to have some great opportunities for our students to learn about things again in a safe environment. The Arizona Bioindustry Association is a professional association of several hundred biotech companies, from small startups, single entrepreneurs, to very large corporations. And they are very interested in our students because we're kind of like that missing gap. They don't understand clinical research. They don't understand all the processes from developing a protocol to running a trial to the whole process there. And so we're getting ready to venture more into their realm. Canon Auditing is a unique company. It's a quality management system solution for the medical device, medtech, IVD, and pharmaceutical companies of all sizes and stages, wherever they are in their product development cycle. And so we'll be able to give our students some interesting opportunities in quality, in auditing, and see what happens there. We were also approached from Orencia Exploratory Medicine. They're headquartered in Düsseldorf, Germany. They are a phase 1, phase 2 clinical trial research organization. They are opening their first North America operation in Phoenix, and should be operational, we're hoping fall, but probably most likely spring 2023. They are in process of getting their student placement agreement in place right now, because they are looking for capstones and internships to be involved in those types of trials. Going to be very exciting for our students. Next slide, please. This is an example of one of the capstone projects that has just gone on. This is at the ASU Mayo MedTech Accelerator. 2 of the startup companies, Medical Mindset and Researcher. Both of these are very small companies, primarily started by engineers who have no clinical background at all. And the capstone project was a clinical study protocol development methodology through literature review for these 2 startup companies. The student that was involved in this is a very seasoned senior CRA at a device company, and she never had experience in what it was like to start up a clinical trial on a brand new investigational product. So she jumped right into this with both companies. They both knew that she was going to be working with each other. Non-disclosure agreements were put in place. And she found out very quickly through her inquiry and interviews with both companies that doing the literature review for them to help them in their protocol development really was going to give them the background to further the protocol. They had no idea that they needed to figure out inclusion and exclusion criteria for trials, what adverse risks were, what minimal risk what's a significant risk, those whole things. So she took it upon herself to put together the literature review and then highlighting those areas for the senior management as they develop the protocol. So as it's been going on, the medical mindset is very, very interested now in keeping the student and that for long term, and that because they were so impressed in what she knew, what she had learned, and she brought into them also other tools to help them get this protocol ready. They will be ready for their verification study in their medical device, I believe, later this summer. And then their validation study, a very large validation study, will be going on first part of next year. And that so there's also additional opportunities now because they learn about IRBs that we're going to probably have some regulatory students helping them with their IRB submission. This will become probably one of our first legacy projects. Next slide, please. Phoenix Children's Hospital. Phoenix Children's Hospital approached us with an internship project. The IRB director was in the process of preparing his submission package for their accreditation and found that he really could use some help. And so he has an internship. This isn't a remote internship, so the student doesn't even have to go on site at all. It is funded. The student is paid an hourly wage and approximately 10 hours per week. Not really set hours, whatever the project works. And the best part was for the student that there's direct mentoring by the IRB director. The IRB director has already told the student that as soon as they finish this project, this position is going to lead to a fully funded IRB coordinator position if the student is interested in that. IRBs are not the easiest thing to get into. And the student that was selected for this, we had 3 to 4 students that it was very competitive on getting this position because they all knew that you just don't get an IRB position. And this was, again, a safe way to see, is this an area that I would enjoy working in? Would I learn? Could I contribute to this kind of a field? And so hoping to see how this all turns out. The internship will be done, in about a month from my last talk with the student. And so very curious to see what her outcomes are going to be and what her next steps are. Next slide, please. So this is kind of our slogan. It's like desire the best, and that we desire the best in our students. The students desire the best in the learning, and the industry desires the best to help them. That's the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Barbara. I think we've got time for maybe one quick question. If anyone has a burning question, Melissa.
So I do have a real burning question. One is, you mentioned just the one student was getting paid. So does the students get paid and then they pay ASU for the credit, so they get the credits for their course?
Internships, if the internship is done in the capstone, it's kind of, that's their capstone.
Okay.
Yeah, so then they don't, the money they get paid, they get to keep.
Okay, but they still then pay ASU for the credits that they have to, the 4 credits or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
And then one other quick question, because
Sure.
I'm hogging it up, but what if you have a student, our professional students work for maybe a competitor, then they're invalid. They can't take that, they can't work for the competitor. Like if they're working for a different LabCorp per se, then you can't, even with the CDA, that you can't do that, right?
Correct. Yeah.
So Melissa, to answer your question about the internships, we do not have a formal internship program. So there is one in the undergraduate. If they want to apply through that, they have to pay internship fees, but we just, we go through them and they don't pay a specific for the internship for extra credits.
No.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I understand the goal is to get the capstone credits so they can graduate.
Right.
But if they, and so it's really, they just pay the regular standard tuition.
Right.
And if Beck & Dickinson per se gives you a $10 or $20 an hour rate, that's yours to pocket.
Correct.
Right.
They pay the
So-
student directly.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Not all of our students that are doing internships are doing capstone projects. So we
Okay.
just set up the internship, and that's basically, we set it up, it's on their own. They do not pay for the internship, but they often get paid to do the internship.
Yeah.
So
Right. Okay, thanks very much.
Sure.
Jerry, you had a question.
Yeah, sorry, I'm a future student of Dr. Marusiak's.
Okay,
And
great.
I just had a quick question. How does grant writing work in the capstone program? Let's say I wanted to apply for a grant to a large pharmaceutical device company, both of which.
Actually,
would-
have a
how
student
would
doing,
that happen?
Jerry, I actually have a student doing that as his capstone right now. So it is
Oh,
doable.
wow. Okay.
So we can
Cool.
talk.
That's great news. So I guess the question would be the partnership. You guys are open to doing partnerships then. That's the
Oh, yes.
partnerships with the for grant writing, and the grant I'm assuming would go to ASU, not to me, because I'm doing it in partnership with ASU.
Well, we have
Maybe.
to look
I
at,
don't
we
know.
have to look at it.
Sure. Okay. I look forward to having your class.
Great.
And I guess I've just got one question, which was how do you make the decision if you've got a number of students competing for the one particular internship? Do you make the decision, or is it the company that they're going to make the decision?
No, the students, they actually, there's an application process that the students will have to go through. They have to have a current CV or resume. There is actually a letter that they need to write, a cover letter that goes through explaining their skills, their areas of weakness, things like that. And then the industry partner actually does interviews. And we give them a resume, a copy of the resume, and they set up the interviews. The partner then informs us and the student which one they have selected. And then we have paperwork that follows the student all the way through.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Any other questions?
And unfortunately, we're not always able to fill these requests for internships and people to do different jobs because, we just, send people, but if they don't have the right qualifications, so.
Yep.
Yeah.
Excellent.
It has been very interesting how quickly it's growing.
Yes. Yes. Definitely need that collaboration. Benefits everyone.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you very much, Barbara, and also to Negin. Thank you very much for your presentations today. Everyone can give you a clap. Excellent. And thank you everyone for joining our webinar, and look forward to having people join us for our next webinar in another few months' time, and we'll send out reminders about that closer to the date. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Thank you.